What's up, guys? I've got another video for you here about the Sigma FP. As you know, I love this little guy and I'm trying to use it more in my workflow for video recording and narrative work and just explore more of what this tiny little cinema beast can do. So I wanted to take a bit of a deeper look into shooting the uncompressed CinemaDNG RAW versus recording Blackmagic RAW to the Blackmagic Video Assist recorder. The main difference between these two formats is that the Blackmagic RAW is compressed, whereas the CinemaDNG is not compressed. So I wanted to see, is there really that much of a visual difference? Because the CinemaDNG is so massive. The file sizes are absolutely ridiculous. So with a 1 terabyte SSD drive, you're going to be able to record 4K, 24 frames per second, uncompressed CinemaDNG for about 50 minutes or so. So under an hour. Now, the Blackmagic RAW, on the other hand, even using the lowest compression setting of 3:1, you're still gonna get like 2.5 hours. The CinemaDNG is almost 3 times the file size of the lowest compression Blackmagic RAW. And if you increase the compression of the Blackmagic RAW to like 8:1 or 12:1, which for a lot of the content that I'm shooting, that is just fine. You're gonna get like 4 or 5 hours or so, 4K at 24 frames per second. Maybe there is a really large visual fidelity difference between the CinemaDNG and the Blackmagic RAW. So let's take a look. We're gonna jump into DaVinci Resolve and compare the two file types and see if it really is worth all that extra size and storage space that the CinemaDNG takes up. Here we are in DaVinci Resolve, and I've got the CinemaDNG clips as well as the BRAW clips side by side here. One thing that I noticed kind of off the bat is that the BRAW clips do seem to be a touch darker. You can really see it between these two. I didn't change any of the exposure settings on the Sigma FP when moving between these two formats. Okay, so let's hop over to our color page here, and I'm gonna try to keep these grades pretty simple and as similar as possible. I don't wanna, go too intense with it. Push the exposure, up a couple stops, down a couple stops, see how that looks in each version. Try to push the clips a bit. These were shot in a, I guess you could say, fairly challenging lighting situation. It was harsh outdoor sunlight with a lot of pretty harsh shadows. So really pushing the maximum dynamic range from the camera. All right, so first our CinemaDNG clip. So we're gonna change this to the clip settings. Okay, so our color space. Let's set this to Blackmagic Design because that's what we'll be able to do quite easily with the BRAW clips as well. And it's only giving me a Blackmagic Design film, which really is just a sort of quick little preset of these sliders here. And I'll turn on highlight recovery. And if we just pop over to the BRAW clip, there's just a few additional settings. We're gonna wanna set the color science to Gen 5, the most recent one. Color space is going to be Blackmagic Design. And we want to do Blackmagic Design film as well. So the settings are not exactly the same. If we just kind of run down here quickly, in the BRAW clip, we've got saturation, contrast, midpoint, highlight roll-off, shadow roll-off, white level and black level, with, of course, our color temperature, tint, and exposure. in the CinemaDNG clip, we have many of the same settings, but some of them are named a bit differently. You know, there's no highlight or shadow roll off here, but we've got a mid-tone detail slider, a color boost slider, lift gain. Those are, you know, slightly different naming conventions. Okay, so instead of doing a color space transform here, I'm just going to bring the gain up a bit and lift the shadows as well. Just so we don't clip our shadows in the scope here. We've got the RGB parade on the right there. Give it a little bit of a color boost. Contrast. Our temperature, set that to, you know, daylight around 5600 Kelvin or so. Bring our tint into the greens more, since this was an outdoor shot in all right, let's take a look at the clip in full screen. Just let it play through for a bit. Here. Hanging out with the cats. I have 3 cats, by the way, guys, if you are curious. And the other cat fans out there, cat fam, drop a comment below. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button too while you're at it. Okay, let's head over to our BRAW clip here. We'll turn on highlight recovery. We're gonna set our white balance. Woo! Not that high. Around 5600. Now we gotta pump up our saturation here. So there isn't a color boost, so we'll just have to work with the saturation and bring some contrast in there. Now we can use our video black levels. That's the VBL option here. So that's gonna bring our, it's basically just gonna crush down the shadows a bit. So they're just at the bottom of the chart, but they're not, you know, clipping down there. We can increase the shadow roll off to sort of soften that transition in the darkest areas. And then similarly with the highlight roll off, but we wanna, let's see, we can bring our midpoint up too here. Bring in a little more contrast. Let's see, we want to bring our tint down into the green range. Bring that midpoint up. Just want to make sure we don't clip our highlights. We can also go over to the color options in the BRAW clip. Let's give it a little bit of color boost to get those greens a bit closer to the CinemaDNG. I do have to say there is a vibrancy in the CinemaDNG footage that I'm just not quite seeing in the BRAW footage. I'll even take this color boost down a little bit so we can make things a bit more equal. brighten things up a bit. So if we kind of look at the scopes between these two clips, let's find a kind of similar point. So there's a lot more detail in the shadows, it looks like, in the CinemaDNG versus the BRAW, whereas the BRAW's got some more detail in the midtones, I would say. But it doesn't quite have the pop that the CinemaDNG does. All right, let's take a look at these other clips here. I'm just gonna copy over the settings from each respective clip format. Bring the highlights down a bit. Let's take a look at these clips in full screen mode. Yeah, we can pick out some details in the shadows, but it's still quite dark, a lot of contrast. Nice filmic look in the CinemaDNG. Take a look here at the BRAW, which I don't know, has a bit of a more just vintage feel to it. I'm not doing the best job at, really precisely matching the grades. I'm kind of more just interested in exploring some of the differences. There definitely seems to be less detail in the shadows here, at least with this current grade on the BRAW clip. All right, so let's just pump up our exposure. Let's go 2 stops over here. Let's take a look at our shadows in the CinemaDNG footage. You can really bring a lot back. Yeah, that's a lot of detail back in those shadows that was just totally crushed before. And then we'll bring our highlights down. Bring the gain down. Clipping. Yeah, we can really boost those shadows. And I'm not really noticing a lot of noise in the shadows either. I'm seeing a lot of detail in the CinemaDNG footage here. It's really lovely. It's really holding together. Really holding together with being overexposed and the shadows really lifted. But you can very easily compensate by bringing the gain down. Okay, we'll take a look here at our BRAW footage. Let's see what we can do with this. Bring up the black level too much here, then it just gets washed out. The shadows get all washed out and gross, so we don't want to do that. But let's bring our exposure up 2 stops over. Okay, so yeah, we've got some nice detail coming back in the shadows there. I guess we can bring our white level down, but again, it doesn't function quite like the gain slider in the CinemaDNG RAW settings. Let's see if we take the gain down in our color bar tab. Yeah, it doesn't pull it down in as smooth of a way. You know, we're kind of just flattening out the highlights. We're not really bringing the detail back in there. And the lift down, that's kind of crushing our shadows again. Now, I don't see too many issues or anything with noise in the shadows, but the highlights are still quite overexposed. Yeah, it's just easier to balance out the highlights and the shadows, preserve the detail in both of them in the CinemaDNG versus the BRAW. Well guys, I guess that's what you get when you work with uncompressed versus compressed RAW. There really is, I think, quite a bit more information, more data than uncompressed RAW, even though those file sizes are just absurd. But it really does look gorgeous. And it seems that you can push it, you can overexpose it, or if it's underexposed, you can pull that exposure back up in the shadows and not impact the highlights. Yeah. Well guys, let me know what you think comparing the footage between these two formats. My vote goes to the CinemaDNG. I think it is worthwhile to invest in maybe a bit larger storage media, larger SSDs, in order to be able to handle the files, because the quality and the flexibility you get is just really impressive.